Good morning, everyone. I'd like to dedicate our learning this morning in memory of my mother, Mr. Shalamis Rabinowitz, Shalamis Bas Rabbi Yaakov Eliezer. We are in Shnais Meiser Sheni, Perek chapter 5, Mishna Yud, Mishna 10. So we've been discussing the mitzvah of beer, that Erev Pesach of the 4th and 7th years of the Shemitah cycle, we have a mitzvah to remove whatever of the separations that we were supposed to do. We're supposed to remove them. Some of them we give them away, some of them we have to destroy. The Torah tells us that what we do at the time, or what we also do during this time when we do the mitzvah of beer, is we do what's called a vidui maisris, a confession of the maisris, which is really a declaration that what we have done here with the removal of the trimus and maisris, etc., that we've done this correctly, and that we have treated these things according to the way the Torah wants us to. And the Mishnah is now going to go through this declaration piece by piece to tell us what the meaning, what the intent behind the declaration is. Now, the first thing that we're going to mention is what the Mishnah starts off with is that b'mincha b'yom tov ha'achron hayom misvadim. When was this vidui done? It was done mincha of the last day of Yom Tov Pesach. That is when the vidui was done. The vidui was performed Erev Pesach, the day before Pesach. The beer, was performed before Pesach, Erev Pesach. The vidui was done in the afternoon of the last day of Pesach. Now, the reason for this is the following. We have mentioned previously that according to Torah law, the beer can be done by the end of Pesach. It doesn't have to be done Erev Pesach. We'll have a whole Pesach to do it. The Chacham, the sages, are the ones who pushed it earlier to Erev Pesach. Okay, so that means that according to Torah law, I really have more time. And the Rabbanan actually allowed that although, let's say, Meiser Sheni has to be destroyed at Erev Pesach, but if there's Meiser Sheni, you're in Yerushalayim, you have Meiser Sheni left, and you have a certain amount of Meiser Sheni that you can eat over Yontif while you're in Yerushalayim, which is exactly what you're supposed to do, then the Chachamim said, for that, you don't have to destroy. By that Meiser Sheni that you're going to eat over Yontif, you don't have to destroy on Erev Pesach. You basically have a whole Pesach to eat it up and do what you're supposed to do. If it comes out that you have a whole Pesach to eat it up and do the beer, the removal of the way it's supposed to be done. Now, if so, there would be a problem saying the vidui together with the beer itself, because when a person makes this vidui, we'll call it a declaration. The first words that he says are "Bi'arti hakodesh min habayis." I have removed the holy from the house. This context, bi'arti, means I have destroyed. Now, if you still have Meiser Sheni around to eat, then you can't say, I have destroyed the Meiser Sheni, because as part of the Meiser Sheni I haven't destroyed. I'm actually going to be eating it. And therefore, the Chachamim said that although they obligated the beer to perform the Erev Pesach, being that there could be Meiser Sheni that you'll continue eating after Erev Pesach over Yontif, therefore they said the declaration about Meiser, the declaration about beer, that's going to be done basically at the end of Yontif, which by then the Meiser Sheni has already been consumed. Any Meiser Sheni you left over for Yontif has been consumed. So that's why the vidui Meiseris, the declaration about the Meiseris, is about beer. The declaration about the Meiseris, and the declaration regarding the beer, is done at the end of Pesach, on the last day of Pesach. Now the Mishnah says, how was the confession? Which really means, what does each part of the confession mean? What does it refer to? Which means, what does the person is saying it have in mind? So before we go through the Mishnah, let's just read this part of the vidui, of the confession. We'll call it instead of calling declaration, we'll call it confession, which is what it's called. Let's read how the Torah starts. Let's read the part of the Torah that the Mishnah is going to explain. A person who makes vidui maisris starts off saying, "Bi'arti hakodesh min habayis," I have removed the holy from the house. And I've also given it to the Levite, to the convert, to the orphan, and to the widow. These are the parts that we now need for this Mishnah. Now, it's important to point out, which was really relevant before, that the Torah says, "Bi'arti al-Kodesh ben Abayas," I have removed the holy from the house. V'gam nesativ levi, I've also given it to the Levi. These two phrases, our sages interpret, are actually talking about, as we will see, two parts of beer. Bi'arti, I have removed, means I have destroyed. V'gam nesativ means I have given it. Either way, you're removing it. Either way, you are removing it from your domain. The question is, how do you do it? As we learned previously, certain things are given to whoever it's supposed to go to, while other things are actually destroyed if you're not going to have enough time to deal with it the way you're supposed to. So now let's see what the Mishnah says. That first phrase, I have removed the holy from the house. Zeh meiser sheni v'net derevai. This is referring to meiser sheni and to the fourth year produce. That, as we mentioned before, the first 3 years of a new tree, the produce is forbidden, it's arla. The fourth year, the produce is sanctified. You treat it like meiser sheni, you have to take it to Yerushalayim or redeem it onto money and take the money to Yerushalayim. So, bi'arti al-Kodesh ben Abayas, this part of the Mishnah says, I have removed the holy from the house, is referring to that he has removed the meiser sheni and the net derevai in the fourth year produce. Now, how do we know that this section is talking about those things? And the answer is that this section is talking about whatever is called Kodesh. Whatever we see the Torah calls Kodesh. Meiser Sheni is called Kodesh. Net derevai is called Kodesh. And therefore, this section of the Vidui that says I have removed the Kodesh is referring to Meiser Sheni and net derevai. Now, and the fact that it says bi'arti, I removed, doesn't say I've given or I have eaten. I removed, it teaches us that if the deadline for beer is coming, if it's Erev Pesach and you have not eaten the Meiser Sheni, you have not eaten that derevai, you have to destroy it. Now, the fact that the Mishnah says, includes here net derevai, the fourth year produce, means that this Mishnah is siding with one of the, in an argument that was mentioned in a previous Mishnah. There was a previous Mishnah, an argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, I believe. Yeah, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, as to whether Ravai is destroyed or whether it's whether Ravai on Erev Pesach is destroyed or just eaten, meaning really has no din beer. You just leave it the way it is. So the question whether Ravai, Beis Shammai say Ravai doesn't have the mitzvah beer. Beis Hillel say it does have the mitzvah beer. And if our Mishnah says that the words, I have removed the holy from the house, which is the Vida confession, is going on the fourth year produce and not the Ravai, then that means that our Mishnah is following Beis Hillel. The Mishnah is also siding in a different argument because there is no mention here at this point about Bikurim. And we had an argument before. We had in one of the previous Mishnayos, there was a machlekes, an argument as to whether Bikurim on Erev Pesach by the time of beer, is it destroyed or is it given to a Kohen like Truma? The Mishnah here doesn't say that Bi'arti includes Bikurim. So that means here too, this Mishnah is siding with that opinion that says Bikurim is like Truma, that you give it to the person it's supposed to go to. The next part of the Mishnah next part of the Vidui that the Mishnah explains is it says Nasativ leLevi. Are you giving it to the Levite? It's the Meiser Levi. This is referring to the Meiser of the Levi. That he says, I have given it to the Levi. I have done what I'm supposed to do. I have given it to the Levi. Now, there's actually a word that appears before these two words, Nasativ leLevi, and that is, it says V'gam Nasativ. I have also given it to the Levi. Also, it sounds like, besides for X, I have also given to the Levi. There's a connotation that there's something else here. And the Mishnah says, yes, the word of V'gam also is coming to include Zu Truma Utrumas Meiser. This is referring to the Truma that goes to the Kohen or the Trumas Meiser. When the Levi has to take a tenth out of his tenth to give to the Kohen, that's called Trumas Meiser. And that's what this v'gam, I have also means to include, is referring to Truma and Trumas Meiser. Now, we just mentioned before that the fact that Bikurim is not included in the part that's destroyed, that means this Mishnah is following the opinion that Bikurim is given to the Kohen. And therefore, we have to understand why, when the Mishnah says that Vigam, that the word also includes Truma and Trumas Meiser, why not mention Bikurim? And the answer is because Bikurim is very often referred to, and actually the Torah refers to Bikurim as true, uses the word Truma on it, and therefore included in Truma is Bikurim. Next section, Lager la Yasav Lamana. He says, I have also given it to the Levi, to the convert, to the orphan, and to the widow. Ze Meiser Ani. This is referring to a person's obligation to give Meiser Ani. These are needy people. Meiser Ani is given to them. He says, I've done it. But the Mishnah says that these words actually include more than just Meiser Ani. Haleket v'shikha v'peya. They also include leket. Leket is that when a person is harvesting and one or two stalks fall during the harvest, you leave them for the poor. Shikha refers to sheaves or stalks that were forgotten in the field, while there are still, meaning sheaves or stalks sheaves or stalks that were forgotten in the field, not picked up. I believe stalks here means they're still attached to the ground, not the ones that have fallen during harvest, but they're still attached to the ground. You forgot to cut them down, or you forgot to, after when the harvesting is done, you bundle the stalks into sheaves, and you leave them there, and then you go back and pick them up. Well, one of them, if you forget one of them, you have to leave it to the poor. And peya is a part of the field where they're a standing crop. They have to leave unharvested for the poor. So these are what we call matnas aniyim. These are called what we give or actually leave for the poor. We don't necessarily give them to them. We leave it for them. So we say now that this part of the declaration that I have also given to the poor includes these things, these three things of lekachik and peya, those things that we leave for the poor. That's also part of the confession. I have left it for them. Even though these three examples are not mandatory for being able to say the vidoy. That means like this. We have a whole list of things that you have to mention when saying this confession. If you didn't fulfill one of them, if you haven't fulfilled one of them, you can't say the confession. Now, the Mishnah is saying that even though leka chichen peya could be included in the words, and I have also given to the poor, if I didn't leave lich leka chichen peya, I may have been wrong for doing so, but I didn't do it, I can still say this confession. Why? Because in the plain meaning of the pasuk, where it says, I have also given to the convert, orphan, widow, the plain meaning of given is to give. And when it comes to trumas, maisris, maiser ani, we give them to the poor. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to separate it and give it to the poor. We don't just leave it for them in the field. We have to take it, process it, and then we give it to and then we give it to them. That happens by maiser ani. But lechika and peya aren't that way, as I mentioned before. They're left in the field for the poor to come and get. And therefore, the plain meaning of the word, and I have also given, would not include lekachik and peya. Therefore, even if you didn't fulfill them, but as long as you said you fulfilled my sarani, then you could say, I have given. Because the only thing that's really given to the poor is the my sarani. And therefore, if you haven't done the other things, you could have been wrong, but you haven't done the other things, what you're saying I have given is not a lie, because given refers to things that you give. Like a chicken pay, you don't give. So it's not necessarily referring to that. So even if the only thing I can say that are included in I have given for the poor is the Meiser Ani, I've said the truth. At the same time, if let's say you did leave like a chicken paya, you could have it in mind when you make the confession. You could include in the word I have given these things that you leave for the poor. And therefore, if you have fulfilled it, you include it in the confession. And if you haven't, then you don't include it in the confession. But these things aren't mandatory for the confession because since they're not given, therefore the word I have given can be considered 100% true by giving Meiser Ani, giving the tithe to the poor, which is given. And the Mishnah concludes the last words where it says, the words that it says, I remove the holy from the house. Those words from the house are referring to Zoy Challah. This is referring to Challah. Challah means that when we make a dough for bread, we separate a part of it for the Kohen. Nowadays, that's not done. We burn it. But the mitzvah of Challah is supposed to be that when we bake a dough of a certain size, we separate a portion of it for the Kohen. So that too is included in the vidui. He has to confess that this gift to the Kohen that he's obligated to give, he has done. And that is referred to the word bin abayis, from the house. Because since challah is separated from dough, dough is in one's house. That is the gift to the Kohanim that you do from your house. When it comes to truma and such, that can be processed in the field. You don't have to bring that in that doesn't have to be given necessarily in your house. That very often is done. That could also be done. That can be actually separate. That can actually be separated. That can be separated in the field. Doesn't necessarily have to be done from your house. That can be separated in the field, and therefore the section of min habayis, from the house, is referring to something that is done in the house, such as making a dough and separating the challah from that dough to give to the kohen. We are continuing with the laws of Lashon Harah, Klal Zayin, chapter 7, Sif Zayin, paragraph 7. V'atar naskal v'a'er b'esras Hashem, din kabbalas Lashon Harah me'ishu mehemen kebeitrei. Now we're going to discuss the laws of accepting Lashon Harah from a person who you believe like two witnesses. Or for someone who is saying this in a very kind of innocent way, meaning he's not intending to give over this information as much as he just kind of mentioned it in passing. Or let's say there's some kind of evidence to what's being said that would prove that it's true. So these are all three examples where you can get a sense of what the Chavetz Chaim is trying to say. These are all examples where we find that a person, that these circumstances actually lend more credibility to what's being said. And therefore, now when it comes to accepting Lashon Harah, that has been said in this manner, the negative information that's being said in these manners, we have to figure out, okay, how does it affect the laws of accepting Lashon Harah? Even though for most dinim, they're all three the same, nonetheless, as the Chavetz Chaim, I've divided them into their own paragraphs. Because sometimes there are some differences between them. And because there's a lot of different branches, he said, a lot of different details involved in these things. It would be better, in order not to get too confused with them, the Chavetz Chaim said better to kind of give each one their space. And with this, I will begin to explain this with the help of the one who bestows knowledge upon man. The prohibition of accepting Lashon Harah is even if the person who's speaking to you is believed to you by like two people. You know this person, in your mind, this person is impeccably honest, and he just wouldn't say this if it wasn't true. He's like, for you, he's like two witnesses. Says Chavetz Chaim, you may not accept Lashon Harah from him. Now, previously we mentioned something about this. The mutter legale so inyan batsnei la rabbi leish soidai. There was a certain case where it was permissible to reveal something that somebody did wrong privately to the rabbi, to this person who you're talking about that committed a sin, the rabbi to his master, his teacher, ulish saida, into his confidant. If that person will believe you like two witnesses, meaning you have a rebbe, you have a teacher, a rabbi. He trusts you impeccably, and now you are reporting to him something that somebody did wrong. We'll see soon what that case is. But we had a case where you could actually tell this rebbe who trusts you like two people, or a friend, a confidant that trusts you like two people, that this person has done committed a very grave sin. And actually, the rabbi is allowed, if he trusts you like two witnesses, he can accept what you've said, and to dislike him, and to stay away from him, until he knows that the person has repented. So here we see an example where you could believe someone that you trust, like two people. Hainu, so Chavetz Chaim qualifies. When do we say this? Hainu sham shu davar shalafiya emes mutu lasaper begnusai avor zeh im lo yaseh tshuva. Kemin sha'avar b'meized al aven shedavar ha'meforsim b'Yisrael shu aser shein litlois elav oit shem schus. Because we're talking about in a situation where this person committed a very grave sin in the sense that everybody knows it's forbidden, he knows it's forbidden, and nonetheless, you saw that he just did it. There is no excuses for why he did it other than just that he is being rebellious, other than just the fact that he wants to do what he wants to do. Now, if that's true, you're allowed to relate that to people because he's basically established himself as a wicked person, as we said before. So if the information that is being given over by someone who you trust, like two witnesses, is saying something that essentially is permissible to say, meaning based on what he's saying, he's allowed to say it, then if you believe him like two people, you can accept it to the point of that you're not going to have anything to do with this person anymore. Which you would even, and you're not doing that behind the person's back. It may be very clear to that person, it will be very clear to that person that you're not going to associate with him anymore until he does tshuva, until he repents. But not if we're talking about something that, although you're saying something negative, there is merit. It's actually possible to see it, to give it merit. Kagoin, for instance, let's say he did something, and it's possible to say that he didn't realize it was forbidden. Or perhaps it was unintentional. Or if we're talking about just, gossiping about him. Or you're talking about the virtues he lacks. He's not too smart. He's not too healthy. Or to mention what his fathers used to do, what his relatives used to do, what his father does, what his relatives do, what he used to do. These are all examples of things that they can be true. There's still Lashon Harah to be said. If they're said, still Lashon Harah to say them. In this case, believing something like two witnesses, for sure is not going to help. Because even if, let's say, it's not a lie, you're still not allowed. The Torah forbids us to speak derogatorily about a person when it comes to these things, but rather to give him the benefit of the doubt, or like what his father does has nothing to do with him. So it's forbidden for him to say it. And anybody hearing it is not allowed to accept it as the truth, to now look down at the person, as we mentioned before. And therefore, once we're talking about things that are absolutely Lashon Harah to be said, the fact that the person, you believe the person like two witnesses, I trust him. There's no question he's not lying. Fine. He still know how to say it. because all these things are forbidden, even if they're true, and therefore it's not going to help you to be able to believe that kind of Lashon Hara because this person is so trustworthy to you. Because at the end of the day, it's still Lashon Hara. The case before was in a situation where if it's true what he's saying, then it's not Lashon Hara what he's saying. And therefore, if you believe in like two people, you would be able to accept it as the truth, again, in regard to not associating with him anymore. Now this person who is listening and accepting all this, besides committing the sin of accepting Lashon Hara, he's also transgressing a number of other sins. Because the person saying this Lashon Hara, even if it's true, still committing the sin of Lashon Hara. Now that you're listening, you enabled him to do this. Because if you would tell him, I'm not interested, the friend wouldn't be able to speak. He wouldn't have transgressed. And the more you actually accept what the person speaking Lashon Hara says, now it comes out Lashon Hara that he spoke with actually accomplished something. Speaking Lashon Hara that has no effect is a serious sin. One that has effect is an even a graver sin. And therefore, if you, the person listening and accepting, meaning you've accepted, that's one sin. Now, by listening to this person, you've enabled him to commit the sin of speaking Lashon Hara. And if you have accepted what he said, you have now made his sin even graver, which makes your sin of causing other people to sin even more serious. And therefore, the Chavetz Chaim is bringing this in to again emphasize the seriousness of listening to Lashon Hara and accepting Lashon Hara. Have a wonderful day.